Recently, we have learnt a lot of inside information regarding the backstory of how Modern Warfare 3's developmental process actually came about, and this is coming from Bloomberg thanks to Jason Schreier. Now, he does really good research and gets a load of whistleblowers to give him information, and he does everything really thorough, and I think it's really good to get this kind of insight behind the development of games, because sometimes we get poor products and we kind of shift the blame on the developers when often it is a managerial issue or a business issue, and we shouldn't really be blaming them for that. And I think it is really important in helping understand how games are actually shaped. Now, I will have a link to his article down in this video's description, and following on from this article, the general manager for Call of Duty, Johanna Faries, responded to it saying it's wholly inaccurate that the game's timeline was shortened and didn't elaborate any further. And I'm just like, how horrible of a person do you have to be to just come out here and discredit this thorough journalistic work that is much needed for the game? I understand from a business perspective, of course, they don't want this information getting out, but Activision and the higher ups at Call of Duty are all just blood-leeching parasites, and she is clearly no different. Like, the best thing for them to do is just say no comment, like almost anyone does when they don't want to be truthful and honest, because obviously, even if she wants to be honest, she can't. There's a bunch of other higher ups as well, and she would get in trouble, and there's so much on the line for honesty, unfortunately, in this world. And I get that, but I would much rather them just say no comment than just deny things every single time. Anyways, Jason Schreier was the one who actually originally reported that Modern Warfare 3 was initially planned to be DLC. Now, of course, we now know that it's ended up being turned into a fully fledged $70 mainline Call of Duty game. However, Jason Schreier has provided a lot of clarity as to what actually happened behind the scenes. So obviously, the campaign for this game has been receiving very poor reviews because it feels very rushed, both from a narrative perspective and a gameplay perspective. The gameplay is pretty poor. All of the linear campaign missions are pretty generic for the most part. I liked the Verdansk one, but most of the standard Call of Duty missions don't really provide anything new that we haven't seen before, and it's definitely a massive downgrade from Modern Warfare 2's campaign, which I think had great variety in terms of its missions, and also half of the campaign missions are also these open combat missions, which are basically just glorified Spec Ops missions, just played on the Warzone maps, Urzikstan and Verdansk. So clearly, these open combat missions were easier to develop and scrape together in a much shorter period of time. And now we know why the campaign does feel so rushed, and it's because during Vanguard's development, I first want to paint the picture for you regarding Sledgehammer Games. So apparently, Raven Software and Sledgehammer Games were working together on Call of Duty 2020, which was going to be a Cold War themed game. And sometime during the development of that, they fell out and the game was a disaster, and Sledgehammer Games were then pulled off of the project, and Treyarch were forced by Activision to step in and take over the project and turn it into a Black Ops game, and that's why we saw Black Ops Cold War. Initially, the game was not supposed to be a Black Ops game. I think the story was supposed to be similar, you know, the Cold War era, but I think the Black Ops characters were siphoned in at a later point. And so Sledgehammer Games were working on this game, and then it was moved over to Treyarch. But then Sledgehammer were then forced to then make Call of Duty Vanguard in apparently a year and a half. So they had a very short development time to work on it, which just isn't enough to make a new Call of Duty game. Of course, all of the developers now help out all of the studios because it's just impossible for them to pull off a main Call of Duty now. It's such a tight crunch. So during Vanguard's development, apparently Activision higher-ups promised Sledgehammer Games that a similar thing wouldn't happen for their next Call of Duty game, where during Vanguard's development, they were crunching so hard to get the game ready in such a short period of time, where they were working weekends and nights constantly and not getting paid overtime, and they were basically only doing this under the guise that in the future, the next time, this wouldn't happen again. And this can explain some of the problems with Vanguard. I think the multiplayer launched pretty well. The campaign, I think narratively wasn't really that great, and then Zombies was of course really rushed because the game was made in such a short period of time. Clearly they just got Sledgehammer to make multiplayer and the campaign in a short period of time, but they needed a co-op mode, and so during Black Ops Cold War Zombies' development, probably around 5 months before the end of that game's post-launch cycle, they forced Treyarch to then be pulled off of Cold War, which probably explains why Cold War didn't receive as much post-launch content as it probably could have or should have, because they were pulled off of that game to then work on Vanguard Zombies, which they scraped together in a very short period of time, in a matter of months, which explains why that ended up so poor. So it wasn't the developers' fault, and I've said it constantly in videos that Treyarch shouldn't keep getting pulled off of projects. They should be focusing on their own game, and the way that Activision treats their developers is just astonishing, and this is why we really can't be blaming the developers at all. It is almost always the higher-ups' decisions. 99% of the employees at all of the studios, Infinity Ward, Sledgehammer, Raven, Treyarch, and the other studios, High Moon, etc., that also help on Call of of Duty, all of them want to create the best projects, but often they're working tirelessly for not enough pay, and they're working overtime like crazy, getting no sleep, and it's just really stressful and really intense. So yeah, that explains why Vanguard turned out the way it did. It also explains why Vanguard started off well, but then they really struggled after that game was released to sustain it. There was many bugs that needed patching, and they really struggled to support the game post-launch. It seemed to release well, and then after a couple weeks, they didn't keep up with the updates, and so the player base trickled off so quickly, and that's probably because they were then asked by Activision to start working on Modern Warfare 3. Apparently, Modern Warfare 3 was never supposed to be Modern Warfare 3. According to Jason Schreier, it was supposed to just be a mini expansion to Modern Warfare 2, where multiplayer still would have been like Modern Warfare 3, featuring all of the original Modern Warfare 2 2009 multiplayer maps. And apparently the campaign was going to be much shorter, and it was going to be based around Mexico, so it probably would have explained further the story with Alejandro and also Valeria. Of course, in the post-launch seasons, we see she escapes from prison, and then that story isn't really followed up. We know behind the scenes in the DMZ story, she was helping get missiles and gas for Makarov, but that's about all the story we know. Clearly, that story was supposed to be continued. It also explains why Modern Warfare 2's post-launch seasons really felt very jarring storyline-wise. They didn't really feel tied together as much as a game like Modern Warfare 2019 or Cold War's post-launch story, where it had one concise story that you could follow from start to finish post-launch. Both Vanguard and Modern Warfare 2's post-launch story was all over the place with loads of different side stories going on. So yeah, Modern Warfare 2 was supposed to be a much shorter campaign. Obviously, it's very short already, but it was supposed to be way shorter based around Mexico. And if you're unaware, there is a map for Las Almas in Modern Warfare 2's campaign. This was supposed to be the Urzikstan Warzone map, but basically, because they changed the story from being set in Mexico to then being set in Urzikstan, they just reskinned this Las Almas map into Urzikstan. So probably some of the campaign missions were initially going to be set in Las Almas, but now we ended up not seeing that, and that's what the map we were supposed to get in Warzone and also Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, but now we're not seeing that, so that is unfortunate. And yeah, they made Vanguard in less than a year and a half, and then they were working on this expansion to Modern Warfare 2, and I think Infinity Ward were also helping with it, obviously, especially narrative-wise, and then they were told to turn it into a full game because they couldn't miss out on a yearly Call of Duty release, because basically they were going to be changing their format because Activision were worried after Vanguard saw poorly that maybe they shouldn't be doing these intense crunches, a new COD every single year, but they couldn't miss out on that opportunity, so they decided to turn this into a full-on game, and they completely, apparently higher-ups at Activision, completely changed the story to then be based around Makarov and a direct sequel to Modern Warfare 2's campaign. That was apparently never initially the plan, and that's why the story feels so jarring, and that's why it just feels like filler saying on Makarov, because I guess Makarov would have been established in the true Modern Warfare 3, which would have been Infinity Ward's next title, not Sledgehammer Games', and that would have been released by Infinity Ward, you know, in a few years' time, as opposed to this year, where we would have just gotten a mini expansion whilst we wait for Treyarch's next Call of Duty game, which is going to be slated for 2024, because Treyarch was supposed to release their game this year, and I'm glad that Activision are giving them more time to work on that game, because it really needs to be good. Treyarch need a break, because Treyarch have also had similar issues from Activision higher-ups to what Sledgehammer have had with Vanguard and also Modern Warfare 3. So yeah, that explains what happened behind the scenes and why the campaign was poor. But not only was this the case, it seems like it wasn't just Activision higher-ups causing issues, but also Infinity Ward higher-ups. I guess because Modern Warfare 2019 was so successful, it gave Infinity Ward as a studio a lot more power and control over the Call of Duty franchise as a whole, and apparently Sledgehammer Games were having to pass all of their gameplay decisions through Infinity Ward and get approval from them, and apparently this was causing lots of delays and frustrations with the developers, because apparently Infinity Ward would take ages to respond to feedback. They would take weeks to give them information, and this was apparently causing major delays in development because they couldn't proceed with things because they were constantly waiting on feedback from Infinity Ward. And apparently Infinity Ward were also changing things for their game. For example, apparently Modern Warfare 3 was planned to have a pick 10 system, and I love that system, but Infinity Ward higher-ups forced them to remove it. So I don't know why Infinity Ward have so much power, and I hope that after Modern Warfare 2 they no longer have this power that they once had. We do know that Patrick Kelly, who used to be the studio head at Infinity Ward, is no longer the studio head, and now he's a franchise director overseeing Call of Duty, the franchise as a whole, at Activision. Now I don't know if that gives him more power now over the entire Call of Duty franchise and not just the Infinity Ward games, I don't know, but they need to leave the studios alone and let them do their own things instead of having to, you know, pass by information through other developers. That's just ridiculous. And this is the problem with Call of Duty right now. Every game is feeling way too similar on the unified Modern Warfare engine, and I think that's because of higher-ups making the games all just unified and higher-ups commanding decisions to make the games feel so similar, when before Treyarch, Infinity Ward, and Sledgehammer had their own unique identities, and now every single game is just just feeling so similar graphically and everything wise. Now, luckily, Modern Warfare 3, at least multiplayer wise, Sledgehammer Games have made a lot of much needed changes to the multiplayer design philosophy, so it's way better than Modern Warfare 2's. So even though they had to crunch this game in a short period of time, luckily, I guess because they were working with remastered maps as well, you know, it saved them a lot of development time. They managed to scrape together a decent multiplayer experience, but in my opinion, the campaign isn't up to par, and I also think Zombies isn't that up to par. It's not a bad mode by any means, but you can definitely tell it's not up to the caliber of usual Treyarch standard, and I think that's probably because, once again, similar to Vanguard, Activision forced Treyarch to work on this mode in a shorter period of time than usual because they needed to have a co-op mode. Apparently, this mode was in development for COD 2024 Zombies, probably going to be a normal sequel to Outbreak, but higher-ups demanded that they merge this mode they were working on for COD 2024 Zombies with DMZ and launch it early in Modern Warfare 3, so I hope we get a proper Outbreak sequel next year with COD 2024. But yeah, the higher-ups at Activision are just ruining the Call of Duty franchise. I really think Call of Duty should move to like how they planned before, where we get a new game every other year, in between we get a mini expansion, and they can do seasons every single 2 or 3 months as well, but that should hold us over. I don't think we need a new game every single year. That means the games can be better. For example, COD 2024 releasing next year, that's had a long period of time. I do worry that because Treyarch have been working on the other developers' games with Zombies and with ranked play and other stuff, that it might have, you know, taken resources away from that game, but that game at least is having a good development cycle, I hope, until we hear about behind the scenes information again. I hope we don't, but I hope that game's okay. But yeah, it just seems like the development cycle for Call of Duty is always so hectic, where the developers think they have a plan for the post-launch and they're excited and ready to get out, and then they're always told to then shift onto the next project, shift onto something else and produce something in a quick amount of time, and it doesn't allow these games room to breathe, with them always having to shift and move on to the next project. It doesn't allow them to be creative and just focus on one game at a time and adapt it and better it in post-launch, because then they're immediately not able to focus as much on post-launch because they're working on the next thing already in a very short period of time. So now, of course, Microsoft have bought Activision, and I hope that they can remove some of these Activision higher-ups causing issues, but honestly, I'm not expecting any major changes because it's just one big corporation being taken over by a much bigger corporation, and all these corporations just want one thing, and that is money, of course, and that's the way the world works, and I suspect that similar things will also happen. Also, I want to say Activision just gaslight the developers all the time. You may say, well, it's their choice to work, you know, they can leave the company if they want, but no, they're kind of being misled. If they were told a similar situation to Vanguard wouldn't happen again with Modern Warfare 3, and then it did happen again, they were just being lied to and manipulated into working harder, expecting, you know, return the next game, because apparently after Vanguard, they wanted to work on some sort of Advanced Warfare spin-off game. It was going to be a futuristic game set in the Advanced Warfare timeline. It wasn't going to be a direct sequel, of course, but it was going to be somewhat connected to that game, and I guess that's where the rumors of Advanced Warfare 2 came from, because it was rumored earlier this year that that's what Sledgehammer were working on. That's probably where the rumors came from. However, Activision, of course, cancelled that project and then got them to work on Modern Warfare 3 instead. Now, I wonder if that means that after Modern Warfare 3, Sledgehammer may then actually make that game, and I would be down with an advanced movement, a futuristic game every now and again. I definitely don't want to see it every single Call of Duty, but, you know, once every 6 years isn't too bad. The problem before is we had 3 of them in a row, and I think that's the problem we're seeing right now as well. We're getting Modern Warfare games back to back, and then they're starting to become boring and overdone. I would like to see constant changes in eras between the developers. You know, we can have Treyarch in the past, Infinity Ward in the modern, Sledgehammer in the future. That way, the franchise wouldn't get stale and boring. They're always switching things up, and it's always something new. I don't know how this would work in terms of Warzone, though, because, of course, they're probably not going to put advanced movement in Warzone, maybe as a side mode, but definitely not as the main experience, so I don't know how that would work, and that's probably also why a lot of the Call of Duties are starting to feel very similar to one another, because, of course, they're always having to think about Warzone in mind, because the weapons and operators, etc. transfer over, so they're always having to make sure the movement is in line with Warzone, because they don't want fans to feel jarring switching between the modes, because apparently with Warzone and Black Ops Cold War, because they felt different, it caused a lot of issues for players being able to switch between them at ease, and that's why all Call of Duties now are just feeling like Warzone. They're all feeling like the same thing, because they don't want to cause that confusion and that jarring effect for Warzone players, I guess, which is annoying. But yeah, overall, screw Activision like usual. That's everything I wanted to say in this video. Activision, I really hope, can be changed by Microsoft, but honestly, I'm not expecting anything much. I suspect in the future we'll hear many stories to come of similar developmental issues. It's just really, really sad to see, especially with Infinity Ward having power over the other studios. That's ridiculous. It would be like Treyarch forcing Infinity Ward to make changes to their game. They wouldn't be happy with that, even though it would result in a better game, of course. But anyways, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for latest and greatest Call of Duty news and information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.